Welcome to Ceasefire, where we seek to bridge the divide in American politics. I'm Dasha Burns, Politico White House Bureau Chief, and joining me now from either side of the aisle, two guests who have agreed to keep the conversation civil even when they disagree. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman and Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
You two have a friendship that's become a little bit famous, actually. I want you to take a look at this headline from AL.com. They write, the friendship between Senator Katie Britt and John Fetterman, her Democratic colleague from Pennsylvania, began when the pair were at freshman orientation.
Yeah.
Walk me back.
Oh, yeah. This was, I walk in and there was a guy bigger than me. I felt like petite. I walked up to him.
You found someone bigger than you.
Oh, I mean, he's a gigantic man. And he's just turned out to be like the nicest guy. I mean, truly.
And that guy is?
Yeah.
That guy is my husband, or better known as the big unit.
Yeah, the big unit. Yeah. And then I'm like,
big unit.
So he, we were trying to trademark it. But seriously,
John always puts it at a trademark when we have a text with Wesley and Giselle and John and I, and Wesley always trademarks it. John does when he calls him the big unit.
But no, truly, they're both lovely people, and immediately, during the orientation, it just kind of clicked, and then it just kind of grew from there and then when I checked into Walter Reed. She visited me as well too, and then that's been consistent over the last 3 years. And we try to work together on, like a political thing, but on a personal level, it just reminds people that we all don't hate each other. We're all just, like we're actually favorite people. And he'll stop by my office, or we'll just kind of. So
yes.
It's not as I mean, it is very a polarized town, but at least in this case, I know.
Yeah, and that's it. Like we, John said it best. I mean, we walked into orientation and we immediately connected, both with Wesley and John and Giselle and I, and even Wesley and Giselle in the spouse program during orientation. And this whole thing, you kind of walk into the United States Senate, and regardless of what you did before, there's so much to do and to learn. And when we got to our very first office, John and I were stuck in the basement of Dirksen together. It was
so
actually
glamorous being a U.S. senator.
That was part of my undoing, where I'm like, oh my God, I'm in a basement, and in this terrible.
What is Congress?
It is
what happened to me?
That's how they humble you. They put you in this basement. It has cinder block walls, no windows, and a lack of air conditioning. And they're saying, welcome
in the middle of January.
And meanwhile, you hear, I'm sure before you join, you're seeing all of this polarization, all of this partisanship. So how much of a surprise, how refreshing was it to so quickly become friends with someone across the aisle?
To me, it showcased the very best of America. People who have very different political views on a number of issues, but saw each other as people and got to know each other in that way as well. And so getting to know John and Giselle, getting to hear about their kids, this is also another demographic that is not necessarily represented a great deal in Congress, or particularly in the Senate, is people who are raising children in our home states. And so that's something else that we bonded over. Not just, we'd go to committee hearings. We were both on the banking committee, and I remember sitting in the ante room, which is the room right outside of the committee hearing, and talking about the vote schedule. And there's so much of being a parent where people, we obviously raised our hand to do this, but our kids did not.
Yeah.
And I think that has also been a bond too, about how to balance making sure we're present for our children and doing everything we can for our constituency, and also the perspective that it brings to a number of issues being parents. But all of that to say, it has been one of the best parts of being in the Senate is friendship with John and the work we've been able to do together.
Yeah, and Senator Fetterman, for you to have someone across the aisle who has stuck by you to the point where she visited you in the hospital, and at a time when you struggled with depression, with adjusting to life in the Senate early on. How important did this friendship become?
Oh, it's very affirming, and just that, like that, and Immediately, it's just how, I mean, there wasn't media there, it wasn't a story, it wasn't anything. I mean, she just did it on her own. I mean, that kind of a thing. And it wasn't publicized or anything. She just wanted to visit. So of course it meant the world to me at that time. And now, the things get more and more kinds of ugly, in town. It's like there's a lot, I think we should do more like this. And now we're only the first year, now I'm not sure the direction the town is overall going, but you can't forget that we need each other, politically, and we have to find a way to get together. And I represent a very, very purple state, and I can't forget that my neighbor might have a different views on things and that thing, and we have to find a way forward. And then that's been my struggle this year, just trying to do that.
He's been great.
Well, and you've gotten criticism from a lot of folks in your own party for some of your work across the aisle.
Really? I haven't heard.
I can send you a couple of headlines, but yeah, how do you navigate that, and what does this relationship say about the importance of reaching across?
It started the first, just when I visited Mar-a-Lago and I had dinner with the president at that time. Immediately it kind of started there. And it's how interesting is that I took a lot of flack. I'm not sure why. I mean, he invited.
Were you surprised by the backlash, the amount and the level of it?
Or just, but there was no backlash when Madame visited there.
That's actually true. I mean, think about that. Like, John goes and visits the president. The president, the man who has just been elected, by the people of this country to serve in that role, gets that pushback. But then, to your point, when Madame goes in,
there was no backlash.
There was no backlash.
That's kind of like this weird standard where for that. And again, it's perfectly normal to go visit. It's like, why wouldn't you have a conversation, with the president and then it's like, oh, you are kissing the ring, or no. It's like he invited me, and we had a normal conversation, and I would describe it as, like I said, cordial overall, and then it started.
But you will talk to anyone. That is one of the most, I think, refreshing things, both about our friendship and both about our approach. But you believe in talking about issues and working through them. And honestly, that's what we have to do. Think about it. If we're not having a conversation, we will never have a pathway forward. And at the end of the day, we've got to have a lot of tough conversations in this country. And in order to have a tough conversation that is actually going to yield results, it's going to have to be an honest one. And you are never, though, going to have a truly honest conversation with someone that you don't both trust and respect. And I think that's one of the things that I have been so grateful to John for, is we have built a relationship that's built on trust and respect. So we can have really tough conversations, and we can talk about, well, no, this perspective or no, this perspective. And to me, that's what America needs, is those conversations to be had. Get in a room, figure it out, and figure out how to move forward, because the people we serve are depending on that.
Well, you're no stranger to tough conversations. We just saw this year the longest government shutdown in history, and you are largely credited, Miss Katie Britt, with getting us out of it. This headline from Punchbowl News says Senate Majority Leader John Thune called Britt a rock star for helping resolve one of the thorniest issues in the funding talks. You were talking to Democrats, you were talking to Republicans, and you were talking to the White House during a time when a whole bunch of those people were not actually talking to each other. Walk us through that process.
Well, first off, that was a lot of people doing a lot of things, and I credit John Thune for his leadership and Susan Collins for her tenacity and leadership and getting these appropriations bills moving, and people like John, who at the very beginning said, we are not going to put politics above people. We must keep the government open. That laid a foundation to continue a conversation. But knowing that the American people want us to get back to doing our job, and working through the appropriations process as part of that. Leader Thune had done a great job of getting bills across the floor for the first time since 2018 before the August state work period. So ultimately, working through them, pitching an idea to him, and obviously working on the other side of the aisle, sitting down with Leader Schumer about just talking about the appropriations process and trying to get that functioning again. But ultimately, we had to put together a coalition. Jeanne Shaheen, John, others came to the table, and then at the end of the day, working through kind of that last piece with Senator Kaine, which I credit.
That was the only surprise, honestly. I always knew that it wouldn't be any more than 8, the minimum.
John did. John called it the whole time. There were people saying there's going to be 15, there's going to be this, and John said no, there's
spot
not.
on. Price is Right rules and everything.
I know.
Spot on.
It's like, and now people aren't talking. Can you imagine if it was kept shut down through Thanksgiving and right now? Can you imagine the chaos in there? And it took 8 Democrats, with the courage to say, because the entire base were demanding that, and they just turned it into like a game thing. And I'm like, it's like people haven't.
When you say they turned it into a game, are you talking Democrats, Republicans, both?
What I'm saying, it's like, this was a demand by, and people were afraid of parts of our base, and I'm like, we were always the party that refused to shut our government down. And then after what we ended up with it was a vote. Pretty confident that we could have got that same vote, without shutting it down at this point. And for me, it's like 42 million Americans on SNAP. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are the kind of people as a Democrat you fight for, and I definitely could ever vote to put those folks at risk. Things, and then not paying our military and other ones. We have to find a way forward rather than shutting it down. And now flying get less and less safe, and kinds of delays and more chaos. That was a betrayal of our core responsibility.
Well, one of the things that Democrats did do during the shutdown is put health care front and center. And of course, you both know the ACA subsidies are expiring at the end of the year. Bunch of Americans are going to see their premiums go up, and it doesn't look like at this point, unless some miracle happens, that anything's going to change by the end of the year. Now we're looking at January for sort of the next time when the extending the subsidies conversation comes up again. Where do you see Congress at on this issue at this point? What do you think is the most likely outcome here?
Yeah. So first, just to piggyback off of what he said earlier with regards to SNAP, that was one of the great things about the package we put together, is that we were able to unlock the SNAP funding for the remainder of the year, WIC funding for the remainder of the year, veterans funding for the remainder of the year, Capitol Police for the remainder of the year. So moving into January 30th, those things are taken care of, and now we're working on kind of focusing on appropriations bills to get more of that done. When it comes to the ACA conversation, the Obamacare conversation, John and I were actually in a group the other day, a bipartisan group, talking about what is a pathway forward.
Bipartisan conversation on healthcare, that is a big headline for Americans right now. No, truly, it just seemed like on this issue, it's just been so hard to find common ground.
Yeah, so I was encouraged by the dialogue, because to your point, there has not been that before. Obviously, Republicans and Democrats are coming at the issue from a different perspective, but both wanting to achieve the same thing and trying to find a solution, or at least the people in this room were. So I was encouraged by that dialogue. Obviously, I hope that continues. We'll see something move over from the House, and would be hopeful that we are able to coalesce around something. John may have a little bit of a different perspective.
The base demands no common ground. It's really becomes more and more extreme kinds of absolutes, and now so like I have a responsibility as someone that represents Pennsylvania. That it's like just like this table. Red, blue. It's just like that's literally Pennsylvania.
You got the symbolism. The ceasefire set.
And it's a lot easier, like if I'm in like a deep blue state, for example, and then of course now. So that's part of like an honest conversation where we're at right now. and conversations about healthcare. There's a lot of embedded truths on it, and I want to have a vote that has a chance to pass, rather than just making some kinds of statement.
So the 3-year, you had mentioned in an interview recently that the 3-year straight extension you don't think is realistic. What do you think Democrats need to consider as they push forward different plans?
Well, for me, I'm calling that just like a 1-year clean extension. It doesn't require any more than the minimum of the Republicans to vote for that, the ones that are the more moderate ones, the ones that are concerned about those things. And now that doesn't mean that they love, Obamacare, and it means for us that we have one more guaranteed year for our constituents, and then we have a long time to negotiate, like a more durable solution.
Is that something you'd consider, Senator, a 1-year clean extension?
So when you're looking at where we are, and this is where we just have a different perspective about it, you kind of look back to Obamacare being instituted in 2010, and then look at, needing subsidies in 2014, and then 2020. 2021, and kind of where we are now. So it's, from my perspective, it's clear that the system has failed with regards to affordability, because we continue to have to subsidize it to, quote, make it affordable. So I think you kind of have two conversations here. You have the immediate conversation of what happens with the enhanced COVID premium subsidies, and then you have a larger conversation that has to be had about how do we make sure that we can deliver affordable health care.
Well, it sounds like that's what John is talking about, though, right? You're talking about doing a 1 year while you figure out what else can be done.
It's like, I'd like to remind, it's like this was our bill, Obamacare. Not a single Republican voted for that, right?
That's right.
Not one.
That's right.
And now these extensions was through COVID, and that was designed designed to expire at the end of this year. That wasn't like a Republican thing. It was like that was the way it was designed, and now here it is. And now it doesn't require people to agree that it's all awesome, but what we can agree that there is not much time to do this, and negotiate it. I think some changes are appropriate, but for me, you don't have time, and here it is. Let's just.
So I think we would have to have there would definitely have to be a cap on, right now income? you can have a millionaire that's using it, like an income cap, some type of buy-in. There would have to be reforms to it to even create a transition period.
I'm saying it's like I always try to run it through like a jury of a group of folks, in a Walmart parking lot in Scranton. It's like, how can I explain what it's like? It's like, hey, look, I just want to buy you 1 more year here now, and then we could figure out a more durable thing forward, because we all know what it is. We don't have to love it, but we know what it is, and it's just a simple vote, rather than trying to figure out, because
I would say if you want to get Republican buy-in, I think it's also an easy thing to say and to constituents that, like, we're not going to give this to millionaires. We're going to put an income cap on it. I think the majority of America would say yes. And then we're going to say the way we're going to eliminate fraud is just a $5, and I think people can get that too. So John's right with regards to creating a simpler framework of reforms if we want to find a pathway forward that you can easily explain. But you're definitely going to have reforms if you're going to get any Republican buy-in, because doing more of the same, even in a transition period, we're not going to do that.
We just needed 8 Dems to reopen the government. We didn't have to have buy-in over all 47, and that's the point. It's like where it's the minimum kind of a trigger point. And now,
and he's always good at calling this stuff, right? So when we talk about these different things, he can like get laser focused on an issue in a way, like he said, there's going to be 8, there's going to be this. He's pretty good at calling it.
Let me transition to actually a piece of legislation that you guys have worked on together, which is the Laken Riley Act. You both found common ground on immigration there. Senator Britt, you sponsored the Senate version and asked Senator Fetterman to be a co-sponsor, which became law in January. Take a look at this semaphore write-up. The Senate's new power duo is John Fetterman and Katie Britt. When Katie Britt was looking for a Democratic partner on legislation that subjects undocumented immigrants accused of theft to stricter deportation standards, she didn't have to look far. John Fetterman, the one-time liberal favorite turned envelope-pushing Pennsylvania senator, also happens to be one of her best friends. First, I'd like your take on that description of yourself.
It just was not the case. Honestly, like, my views on immigration haven't changed an inch, not at all. But it's like we have to have a secure border. And I really kind of led the charge as a Democrat in 23. It's like our borders, failed. It's become an open situation. And when almost the size of Pittsburgh is showing up at our border, that's not manageable, that's not sustainable, and we can't possibly deliver the American dream for those people at that volume. And that's part of just telling the truth on that. And I also know, to be involved on that bill, that's going to be blowback, and there has. And they claim that my values have changed or anything, and they have not. Two things are true. We can be pro-immigration, but we also need to have a secure border and make sure people that are engaging in any kind of criminal activity, it's like deport them.
A majority of House and Senate Democrats voted against the law. Politico wrote in January that opponents of the bill argue the new law serves as a vehicle to bypass the right to due process and ramp up deportation of undocumented people. What do you say to that?
I think it's like people, often, we forget a lot of the reasons why we lost that election in 24 for that things. And, trying to defend where things were at the border, for example, we can't forget those things. So for me, it's like finding a way forward that has two embedded truths, and that's what I'm trying to push for. And that makes it more difficult because it's getting more and more extreme, and that's driven more by an agitated base.
Senator Britt, I think that some people were probably surprised that you chose Senator Fetterman as the co-sponsor on that legislation. What led you to that?
So we've had conversations about, like we were talking about earlier, about kind of what's in front of us and the challenges that we have. And one of the things that we had discussed at length was just the wide open border. And so knowing that, he believes these two truths and obviously would be a willing partner to have a conversation with, it was an immediate place to start. And we did, and kind of sort of talk through, we've got to do something. And we know if that law had been in place, Laken Riley would still be with us today. And so he was an incredible catalyst in being able to actually do something. And you realize that's the very first time that we've done something on the border in 30 years.
In Congress.
Yes, immigration enforcement, period, in 30 years. So it's also significant for the American people to see us be able to come together and on a narrowly tailored issue, figure out how to move it forward.
Well, it's interesting because I think that Democrats have, or you're telling Democrats that they should learn some lessons on immigration from 2024 and from a lot of recent events. I wonder what your response is to some of your colleagues, both in the Senate and the House, talking about this administration's tactics when it comes to immigration enforcement. Here's Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
What we have seen is that ICE is not overwhelmingly going after criminals. In fact, over 70% of people currently detained in detention facilities do not have a criminal record. So who are they going after? They are going after 6-year-olds in my district. They are going after students and permanent residents for their political views. They are going after Americans born and raised in the United States.
So Democrats' position on immigration on the border was pretty unpopular with Americans in 2024. Some of the enforcement actions on the part of the president and this administration has been less than popular in some areas of the country. Do you think there are lessons that Republicans need to take away on immigration as well?
Well, what I'm saying is I think I agree with some of the statistics she was referencing in that. Because overall, I think it was the Washington Post, they had overall national. They drilled down on some cities, but overall national, at a national level, I think there were plenty of them that were involved on criminal, or they have a criminal conviction in the past as well too. But I don't agree with some of the tactics in targeting otherwise hardworking migrants. And I talked to farmers, and labor has been incredibly difficult for farmers as well too. And it's unsustainable when almost 300,000 people are showing up at our border. And now I don't support targeting otherwise hardworking people as well though too. It's like deport all the criminals. That's reasonable, and I'm But also there has to find a way forward to acknowledging it and a path. And now one of the reasons why I had dinner with the president is like, I wanted to fight for our dreamers, our country's dreamers, for that too. My wife was a former dreamer, and that she wanted to come too. And we had a conversation. Theoretically, he's open to it. Now it didn't work out that way. But what I'm saying, it's like I was fighting for those kinds of values. Dreamers and those other people, I think they're parts of the best American experience. And I don't want to punish children that came here. Just my wife was brought there when she was 7. She can't be held against that. Now, so for me, the dreamers is part of it. So that's what I'm fighting for. And now I don't agree with some of the tactics for ICE, but it's also a necessary kind of an organization. And parts of my party screaming to abolish ICE, abolish ICE. It's like, well, try to get yourself elected. Anything other than a far, far left district, that's not going to happen.
Senator Britt, do you agree with any of what Senator Fetterman is saying when it comes to some of the tactics that we're seeing out of ICE agents?
What I have been obviously keeping front and center is the fact that we had a wide open border for 4 years under Joe Biden. And I think a lot of what you have seen, and we've even kind of rewound back into it, different clips that have been posted are actually old TikTok videos, or the authenticity of things have been proven to not be true. So I think you have a lot of people that are working to spin up people on the edges in a way that I think is not productive and isn't truthful. I think it's important that people know that we hold people accountable to our laws, and the lawlessness that we saw over the last 4 years has to stop. And with that, detaining and deporting criminal illegal aliens, I think is part of that. I mean, whether it's Laken Riley or Jocelyn Nungary, or whether it is people whose children have died of fentanyl overdose or fentanyl poisoning, I think America was ready to be put front and center, and I think that's what this administration is trying to do.
And let me bring up New York City. They spent, I believe it's $7 billion to house and take care of migrants. $7 billion to take care of migrants because it was overwhelmed. And in Boston, folks were living at the airport, literally. And that $7 billion for that could have been to make, childcare or housing a lot more affordable in New York City as well too. That's part of being honest. It's like that. Cities, Chicago and Denver were overwhelmed now too. So that's part of the truth. And that's why it's important to remember that there's a reason why, in part, why we lost in 2024.
And you have to think this was the most litigated issue over the last 4 years prior to this. And President Trump laid out very clearly what his plan was. And he is working to execute on that. And the American people heard it, and this is where they want us to go as a nation. They want us to have a secure border. They want us to have safe streets. And they also, you mentioned ICE earlier, but I think what we've seen, particularly from some of my Democratic colleagues, of vilifying ICE agents in particular, it kind of undermines law enforcement. It undermines their safety and their ability to do their job, and ultimately undermines the security of our country.
Right, Senators, thank you so much for joining me. Senator Katie Britt from Alabama, Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania. Thank you both for coming on Ceasefire.